It's time for today's Tech Coach with Keith George, the Big Tech Coach. This is the podcast for instructional technology coaches and the teachers they support. Here's our host, Keith George.
Hello everybody, this is Keith George. I am the Big Tech Coach, and of course I am joined as always by Mark Coleman. Mark, how are we this evening?
We are fine. I am, at least. It's the beginning of school, so I'm exhausted, but I'm doing pretty well for a Monday afternoon.
And that's a perfect lead in because we are calling this our back to school special. Kind of have to do a back to school special if you're related to education in any way. So we thought we would talk today about a lot of the various aspects that as technology coaches and the teachers, of course, that we serve, how back to school goes in the eyes of, in our technology needs and getting things set up and everything like that. So we're going to dive into that right off the bat with, I actually want to point out or touch base with you on a post that I saw. I think it was in response to a Facebook post, Instagram. I don't even remember where I saw it on your social media, where it was talking about back to school supply lists and
Lord,
in a conversation about the breadth and depth of supply list, you mentioned that your back to school supply list consisted of, do you have internet access at home? And that was it on your list. So tell us about that.
Well, I went paperless in around 2005, 2006. And so I didn't need the reams of paper. Maybe it's just because I'm a slob, but I didn't ask for paper towels or hand sanitizer or any of those other sorts of things. And I just wanted to know if the student had a reliable way to get on the internet, because if they didn't, I needed to take that into consideration with my planning, and I also needed to try and figure out some solutions for them. Sometimes I found donated computers. Sometimes I've actually replaced Wi-Fi cards in student computers so they could go to Starbucks and get on Wi-Fi, things like that. But that's what I needed to know. I didn't need to prescribe them a organizational method, which seems to be what both my son's teachers want. Both of my sons, several of their teachers we want a planner laid out like this. We want you to do this. Me, I just wanted to know if they could connect to the internet reliably so I could take that in my plans. Maybe that's the future of this whole sort of thing, that we, instead of worrying about things for our physical classroom, we worry about things for the blended classroom.
Well, and this certainly, I don't think, and I'm sure that you don't mean it this way, this isn't a criticism for teachers that require certain things.
No, not at all.
It's just the way we are transitioning. I know that there are, I'm not aware of any in Alabama, but there are a number of apps available that will serve as the traditional planner that so many of us that our schools would incorporate. I know that even up until my last year in the classroom, which is 8 years ago now, but still we had school issued planners. Every student got one, and these were
my sixth grader's doing that, has one of those.
Okay, so these are the traditional paper planners. There are varying levels of requirements as far as some schools require, I'm doing air quotes that no one can see, require teachers to incorporate the use of the planner, which can be as simple as, don't forget to write that in your planner. We did use it oftentimes as a first level of kind of response to instruction, or working with students that were having difficulties as far as, I was middle school, so forgetting assignments was a big deal for a lot of my students. So that was a first effort as far as, okay, you have to write the assignment in your planner. I will initial it at the end of class. Your parents will initial it that night so that we at least know everybody's seeing it. There are digital solutions to this, and I can include a few of those in the show notes. There are some companies that market this either as a freestanding app that an individual student can use, or as systems that schools can subscribe to, and all of their students get it, and there's a lot of customization you can do at that point, and things like that. Obviously, there are more, I guess I'll word it like this, there are less customizable versions of that. I'm doing a lot of work with Microsoft OneNote and using that as a note-taking system. Not quite a planner. Go ahead.
I use Keep very similarly.
Right, and so Microsoft OneNote, Keep, but even some of the more that are note-taking and take on the appearance of a notebook. So the app Awesome Note, Paper by 53. I'm just trying to think of iPad apps that serve the same kind of function that have the basic replica of a notebook type of app. So there are several of those that some are using. I think the one advantage to the things that are designed for that comes into, it incorporates a calendar and the course schedule and things like that. I know that I did a review category. I think folks remember that I did a lot of work with Participate Learning and some of the collections on there, and I know I have a collection for middle school student organization, and there are a lot of great apps in there, and I'll throw a link to that in the show notes because that's already just a set of them. So this is the time to think about that, whatever method you're going to use with your students to go ahead and get that implemented as far as just the planner type things. What else do we need to think about?
Well, but going back to the planner, before we leave planners, I've always thought in my head, and maybe this sort of thing exists, but if you're in the corporate world, you have all these team task sorts of things where you can push tasks to your subordinates and they have their checklist they can go through. I would love to see that sort of thing made for a strictly school environment. And usually when you're doing that sort of thing, you're pushing different tasks to different people. I'd like to see it, facilitate groups of students, individual students, so I can go blanket, okay, here's the checklist for the next week. Go down it. And it could be, granted, it could be very concrete. You need to do this assignment, this assignment, this assignment, but also, this topic and turn it in, this topic and turn it in. You can make it more PBL oriented. You can make it more traditional classroom oriented. But I'd love to see that we just all sign up for it, and I can every week shove a to-do list to all my students. That's basically the checklist for the week. Does such a thing exist?
Absolutely. And I want to, forgive me for not having it in front of me, but I do know that there are a couple of apps that do that.
You worked with Zoho before. Would that work for that sort of thing?
Yeah, Zoho would work. I don't think that it would be your best option for this because, again, it's something that is targeted towards the business world. Give me just a second. I will pull up. There is one that is just absolutely wonderful and does exactly this. So let's see if I can pull that up. Again, in order to do that, it does take a system that your school has bought into as a system. So,
of course, me, I'd love to see it just take Google OAuth authentication. So that's one less thing to have to check mark. Hey, Google, get on that.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see.
But, with their reminder and task infrastructure, with their calendars getting so introduced, so tightly integrated with Classroom, seems like that's just an inevitable future with that one.
Yeah, the one that I actually have in the Participate collection that, again, I'll put a link into, is called Complete Class Organizer. And it has a variety of features, but you can go in and set up a semester, you add your classes, so you get a small week schedule view, schedule of the week. You can do to-dos. You can have, it will keep up with your grades and things like that.
Does it have a mobile?
I'm sorry?
Does it have a mobile app?
Yeah, this is the, when I say app in this instance, I'm talking about in this case an iOS app. I believe they have it as well, but they also have. I'm looking to see how they do theirs. You can do it as a teacher and have the class, and the students can. Basically they are added to your class, and so you can push things out to them. Also, My Homework is just the name of the app. My Homework Student Planner is the same way. And a lot of these get their power if the school, adopts it, so that you
Right.
can have the integration of, they'll even put in, and I'm speaking in generalities, but like I said, I'll provide a link that has more details. They allow the school to pre-populate schedules and pre-populate school calendars and things like that. So the setup is, which is usually the time-consuming part, the setup is a lot easier for the teacher and things like that.
With all of these programs we're talking about, usually they're so siloed. Our student database is removed from our LMS, which is removed from these sorts of planning things, which is removed from the website. And, eventually a big player, and I'm thinking Google, Apple, Microsoft, is going to just drop some things to tie this all together. A student database program, we're regulated using iNow and Chalkable's products here in Alabama. But I would love to see something that can output things acceptable for the State Department that integrates so tightly with all these. Chalkable is basically dropping its own LMS, which I'm going to say this diplomatically, looks like a Chalkable, looks and works like a Chalkable product.
Right. And I think that's another example of a company trying to fill all of those holes. And I don't necessarily knock them for that, because just like you said, it would be great to have all of this integrated. And there's not that overreaching solution. And I think the better solution is to make these products interoperable, but the data governance issues and the security issues are such that that's very difficult. I remember, and I'm sure you do, the school interoperability. It was SIIP. The School Interoperability something program. That was the whole purpose, is to get all these school apps working together. So if you had one thing for your student management, and one thing for your lunchroom, and one thing for your library, they were to be designed to meet such standards so that they could interact easily. And that never really came to fruition, because with the challenges that came up with it, all of the major players just started adding their own systems. So it became easier to adopt a system than...
Yeah, which big boy are you going to buy into?
Right, and we've talked about that even with college LMSs and things like that. It gets to the point where it's just easier to adopt into a system, even if this one module is not the best for it or anything like that. As we talk about LMSs, though, this is the time to get things set up. Didn't I hear that there were some new features for Google's Classroom?
They dropped a whole handful of them here in August. last week, about midweek, they all started dropping. Their Guardian summaries is really interesting because, parent portals are always a thing with LMSs on the K-12 realm. And Guardian summaries, I've turned it on. I worked with David, who's our Google Apps guru admin here in Montgomery, and he got it turned on for us. And so we can go turn on Guardian summaries and subscribe parent email addresses to your Google Classroom.
Okay, so Guardian summaries is the Google terminology for a parent.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And what it is you will enter the email address of the parent entitled to a Guardian summary, or parents, it's however many email addresses you want to tie to a particular student. But what it does is, it's pretty neat. If that student is involved in, say, half a dozen Google Classroom classes within your Google domain, the parents only get one email that compiles all of those classes.
Oh, that's nice.
And it will have assignments missed last week, scores from last week, things due this week, notes, and the announcements portion of the announcements portion from Google Classroom. You can make specific things called announcements, and all the ones for all your Google Classrooms will be compiled into one digest email that they get weekly.
Okay, so, and weekly is the only option or the default option, or?
I think it's the default option, and I believe that's the one you get. So you get basically the week in review and the week upcoming all together. So that's a neat feature with this, and it lets parents get a view inside the Google Classroom without you having to give them some sort of login to your Google Apps domain and getting them logged in. They also did a topics thing for your stream, so you can create different topics. So if I'm, say, teaching English or a language arts class, I could have a grammar track, a literature track, things like that, and you could break down items in the stream by that track. Okay. There's a better preview for the attachments that come with your assignments and posts. Inbox, Google Inbox, which is I don't know how much you use Google Inbox. Do you use Google Inbox?
I actually tried Inbox and have opted to go back simply to either checking it through gmail.com or actually getting it incorporated. I know this is heresy, pulling it into Microsoft Outlook. Well, we're an Outlook shop at the State Department of Education, and
we're an Outlook shop also, but still on my Nexus 6P, I use the Gmail app to check my Exchange email. So, but it will allow Inbox to work with student email, so it pulls all those notifications together and does all that inbox mojo that comes with it. So you've got that. Also, there's some more details when creating a class. But the mobile app has a really great feature. You can annotate documents with your finger in the mobile app. So you can write on documents and PDFs and save those annotations. And I'm not sure if you can turn them in with that, but you can at least save them for your personal use. I believe you can turn them in. Somebody will probably clarify that for us here very soon.
So you're talking about from the student side, you can annotate them.
Right. The student side, teachers and students.
Okay. So a student turns in a Google Doc. I pull it up as a teacher. I can annotate with my finger, circle all the red things or circle all the wrong things. Blah blah blah.
It's definitely, I've only done limited experimentation with it to see that it works so far, but it is through the Classroom mobile app. So it's not through Drive that I can tell yet. It's it's sort of a dark art trying to figure exactly out how these piece together in the grand scheme of things. But I'm experimenting. But I pulled up a PDF and I've drawn circles on it, both as a teacher and my fake student account. So
I guess what I'm asking is, the student turns it in, you annotate it as a teacher. If you then send it back to the student, do the annotations remain?
That's what I need to experiment with.
That's gold right there.
Exactly, and it allows you to have a little. Well, I'll just be honest. Whenever I talk about LMS and working online, the math teachers always raise their hand, and I have a hard time satisfying their wishes. I mean, I know there's plugins for docs and things like that, but having students able to do work on a pad with their fingertip and draw and annotate, that's a nice thing.
Right. But when you flip that and you talk about mobile learning in the the review and the drill and practice arenas, it's math that is the easiest area.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Also, teachers now, there's always been that ask a question feature for Google Classroom, which generally you could have a student answer a question. You could turn on sort of this little threaded discussion switch for it. Now teachers can ask multiple choice questions. So if you want to just bring it down to some straight up drill and review, you could do that. I've noticed that when I'm adding my forms with the new quiz feature to Google Forms, when I add that to Google Classroom, it gives direct links to the Sheets response list. So I can attach a Google form, and it doesn't even have to be one of the quiz ones. It can be one of the just straight up Google Forms to a Google Classroom issue, and it will link the teacher straight to the sheet of nothing but the answers and responses. So I think that's a majority of what dropped in August, but I believe that the reason they added the quiz feature to Forms, besides the fact that everybody was using it for that anyway with Fluber, is so it could tightly integrate and it become the testing engine for Google Classroom without them saying they're developing a testing engine for Google Classroom.
Right, and I think that's the important thing to watch with Google Classroom is that they are adding features and improving things so quickly. I know that there are numerous ways to look at Google Classroom and kind of give it's not ready for prime time when you compare it to one of the for-profit big well fleshed out
or open
LMSs.
source or open source
or open source. I was having a Moodle discussion today and talking about challenges and things with Moodle as well. But
I'll tell you this: I am going to try with the college class I teach on education technology. It's for teacher trainees, prospective teachers, and I am going to try and do it strictly through Google Classroom this semester. Let's just see how that works out.
That'll be interesting. How is the university approaching that since they are a user of one of those other?
They use Moodle, and I'm starting everything from the Moodle. The students have to join the Moodle, so if it blows up in my face halfway through, I've got that avenue. But with what I'm doing, I went to Nicole Zampano's session at ISTE.
Yeah, she was a guest on the show a couple of episodes back.
A few episodes ago. And she talked about this thing she had done for teachers where they were using a bunch of Web 2.0 apps. So I've added that layer to my class. And so there's 10 different commonly used teacher Web 2.0 apps they have to use and then share the result with me. All those results are going to be shared with the link they post in Google Classroom. I'm going to ask a question, post the link to your thing link here, post the link to your QR codes you generate here, post your QR codes here, things like that. And so I'm going to just see how it works out. I mean, I figure as the education technology teacher, I've got to redo the class every couple of years or it's going to be hopelessly antiquated. So here we go.
And so that all goes into kind of one of the other topics I had down for us to mention is as both a teacher and getting your students prepared, aside from the basic get your course set up in your learning management system, which that should have already been done well before now.
That's wishful thinking.
Although we do have across the country school systems that aren't even ready to start back quite yet. I know that I was speaking to a friend of mine, and in fact it was Brad Spearson, the managing editor at Participate Learning, and just in the course of a conversation we were having, I asked if his kids had started back, and they don't start back until I believe it's the Tuesday after Labor Day. Of course, they're still in school into June, which it's interesting when you move around the country how, I'm just going to say how absurd one area's schedule sounds to the people in a different area. It sounds absurd for us to think about being in school in June down here in the Southeast. However, there are, like I said, there are school systems that see us starting back before Labor Day and think we're just absolutely crazy. So, there probably are some that are still setting up their LMS. But in those first couple of days, both from the teacher standpoint and the tech coach standpoint, there are a couple of things that you need to deal with and work with on your LMS. Obviously, there is some student training that takes place from the teachers to the students. A little siren in the background to entertain us from the.
I didn't do it.
Yeah, they know this is important, so they were coming by at just time. So when you set up your LMS, you've got to get your students involved. I think one of the areas that is probably most challenging, whether it's a totally online course from like post-secondary or professional development, or even your K-12 course that are, for the most part, LMSs in K-12, for the most part, are blended. We certainly are having more and more that are completely online. But either way, there's still that need to really engage the students in that online environment. What tricks have you used to try to capture them in that first week or so?
This is only my second beginning of the school year as a tech coach. And when it was just me and my students, I would have plenty of repeat students. So it was easy for me to fall in the rhythms and have peer assistants and folks that are old hats at the way I do things, drag my students along. When I'm working at it now I don't want to call it the enterprise level, but the system-wide level, it can be a daunting challenge, both for teachers and students. First, I'm looking at so much teacher turnover, especially in some schools. I'm looking at an incredible amount of teacher turnover. Some of them coming from other systems, and when I go talk Google to them, they're good. I got it. I'm good with it. Some of them never broach the topic. Some of them haven't thought about an LMS ever because of the system they were at. Others are finding our lack of a standardized LMS a step to the past. It's difficult to get them all on board at the same time, headed the same direction, especially when coupled with the fact that we get required to do sessions on entering attendance, entering grades, how to enter lesson plans. And we're doing those with the teachers, and they're worried about that because they've got specific requirements from their principals and system-wide administrators of what these things have to listen to. They're worried about dotting those I's and crossing those T's. And so then when we talk about, all right, let's talk about your LMS and how to engage your kids using technology and what sort of assignments we give, and they're already burnt out because they've just spent the last hour with me talking about how to enter the lesson plan template in Chalkable.
Right. And I think one of the things that we fall into in that area is that we get caught up in those templates and those requirements for some of the systems, and then when we get to our LMS, we kind of have those templates in mind. And I know that the majority of LMSs, and I'm guilty of this, probably even to an extent now. I think I'm getting better at it, but there's a lot of text in there, and we need to incorporate some of those other medias. We need to have some videos, even if those are videos created elsewhere, but we also need to, create our own so that it is our picture and our voice that our students are hearing, and throw in some graphics and some, cartoons or pictures.
And a lot of this, that means a lot more work for us in several ways. The old teacher standby was, once you developed your curriculum, please let me teach the same thing next year because I can just bring it all back. But I looked at some videos I made summer 15 for just some intro to Google Drive, things like that. And those videos don't look like Google Drive does anymore. I mean, they do for the most part, but they're moved buttons in it and things in different places. I gave up when I was doing here's how you use Prezi screencasts. I gave up trying to keep those in order because Prezi every 6 months would make me have to do another one. So why don't I just,
Right. And now I will admit to one way of doing this that helps engage the students, whether it's from the coaching standpoint and you're talking to teachers, or even from the student standpoint when you're talking to a new group of students, and that is to include some student examples from previous years, or in the case of coaching, some examples from other teachers. Now, the key to that with coaching is all of your examples can't be from that star teacher, because you almost don't want them too good. You want the screencast that has some verbal mistakes. You want the presentation that has an excessively long pause, just to show that it's not about perfection.
And that it's okay, and that anybody can do this, but when anybody does this, we're human.
Right. So I know that you and I had been talking about, and you mentioned it briefly, a lot of from the coaching standpoint, a lot of the required information that has to be disseminated at the beginning of the year. And I think that one thing from the coaching standpoint, when you think about the beginning of the year, is there's usually a good bit of that type of, I don't like the word, but this is exactly what it is in this case, that training in either the days leading up to the first day of school or maybe in the first week. But for most of us, you're also not going to get coaching requests that first 2-3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks of school, because those teachers are so caught up in getting settled in their classroom, and so
getting the year rolling.
Right, absolutely. So one thing that I try to encourage coaches to utilize that time for, obviously, is planning, looking for some school-wide goals things like that you want to help work the teachers too. But that is also the perfect time to observe teachers. Obviously, if you've got a good coaching relationship with your faculty, and if you have new hires in the building, this is a good time to establish that relationship. That, you know what, I'm not evaluating you, I'm not grading you, I just want to see what's going on, so that we have some common ground to talk about when we do meet, and maybe take the time to slip in some resources that you're aware of that relate to what they are working on, and it's done as more of a, hey, I thought you might want to, I thought you might like this. And I know that as coaches we have to watch how we phrase that, because as you may have picked up on, I caught myself even when I was saying that sentence just a moment ago, that it's, hey, here's something I thought you might like, as opposed to, hey, here's something I think you want to try. Because one of those is, I'm just helping you out, here's something that I've got, I'm sharing with you. The other is almost corrective in nature. So you have to pay attention to your words when you do
But
that.
you know, it's sort of a double-edged sword waiting for those first couple of weeks while everyone gets it running, because so many things you would like them to establish the precedent of that's what we're going to be working in this environment this year. And if you're not, pardon me, where's my cough button? If you're not, it's a contagious
Exactly.
cough. If you're not getting them, if you're not doing sessions with them at the beginning of the year, are they going to go into it at the beginning of the semester? Or are they going to work with it at the beginning of the second 9 weeks? Or are we just delaying it and it won't come around till next year?
Well, right, and that's why I think that being in the room and doing the observations and having it be those helpful little, here's something extra I did for you, plus the even if it starts as the informal conversation, hey, I really liked what you were doing, with your grouping. How did that seem to work out for you? Where you're starting those conversations, and you can lead those conversations to some of the bigger goals that you have. But that coaching relationship is, we still want to predicate it on what the teacher is seeking to improve on, even though we have to always fit that within the larger district goals. We want them to, even if teachers, even if sometimes as a coach we guide you to some things, we still want that identification of an area that we can help you with, that we may be able to help you with, to come from you. It's our job as technology coaches to listen and then be that helpful person that seeks out ways to improve an area that you've identified. But sometimes we are put in that role of, these are the things that we want to work on as a school. Now, hopefully those school goals have been established with input from the teachers, through faculty meetings, pre-service, in-service sessions, institute days, things like that. There's been some teacher input on that, so we can still reach for those institutional goals while also seeking out to serve the individual's goals. It's challenging, and I think maybe you have a point, Mark. Maybe that's the area that we focus on in that first month, are those institutional goals that we already know about, and then we can transition more into the individual's goals.
And part of the problem is the staff rollover, faculty rollover, even from institution to institution within the system. I know I've got teachers that were during in-service week before school that were transferring schools. Some of them from middle to high school, some to different different parts of the system. But without a unified vision for the system as a whole, they're going from the local vision of how technology should be integrated to a different local vision of how technology would be integrated. And it's hard to hit the ground running with these teachers when they've got so much going on. I would just wish we could, it'll never happen, lock down personnel, say, 1st of July, and start working with them.
Well, and you're absolutely right that that's never going to happen. In fact, at a school visit today, again here in Alabama, in this particular school district, they've been in school. They're basically, I guess, starting their third week, either third or fourth. I think it's a partial week, but they're certainly 15 days, 12 to 15 days into the semester. And a kindergarten teacher is leaving for another school district 15 days in. So that's a challenge for an administration and obviously for a coach as well to, be forced to catch somebody up that's just coming in. And also, at this point, it's not been a huge investment probably that you've put into that person that's leaving, but there's still some effort that's been put in. So, and
who knows? I mean, I'm not going to say there aren't brilliant teachers out there still looking for a job, because I know there are. But all of a sudden, the system has to scramble to fill that position. So it might be a new teacher. This might be the first time in the class. It's going to be someone who needs a job at this late date, which could be granted. Please don't write in and say, "Oh, there are great teachers still looking for work," because I know there are. But it's part of it isn't just the bank of teachers that you have to pick from at this late date. It's the fact that you have to pick one now. You don't have the luxury of waiting till the right candidate comes in the door. You have to take the candidate that matches the profile when they come in the door.
Well, and absolutely, you were talking about me because my first year of teaching story, and that I moved to start graduate school, and so I moved from an area that in which I was fairly well connected, had done my student teaching, my internship, and had several connections to the college town that graduates the most teachers in the state, in which I had never even been to prior, and started looking for a job. And obviously, there weren't any of those positions, and my first teaching position ended up, I actually was hired basically Thanksgiving week, and was at a school system that was a 90-minute commute. Not 90-minute, 90-mile commute. Something like that, away from where I was living for that first teaching job. So yes, there are great teachers. No, it is more difficult to find certainly an experienced teacher, unless it happens to be one of those situations. So you're right, we're never going to lock them down in July, but that's
Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to only lock them down in July, but have them doing 3 days a week of in-service for the month of July on things, and you get to help teachers put together their LMS and their vision for technology in the classroom for the month. Of course, you'd have to pay everybody for that.
I was getting ready to say, okay, folks, the district could you do to spend 3 of your 5 days every week during the summer working on in-service stuff, to send your comments to Mark Coleman. But you're right.
I'm a believer in year-round school, so
yeah, and that's another conversation. I think we both admit and acknowledge that teachers do an incredible amount of work during the summer. I think what we would be leaning to is for a bit more of that work to be organized work, where yes, you're absolutely getting paid for doing it, but that it was some structured planning time. So you're still getting the planning time, but you're getting it with the collaboration of your colleagues, whether at that school or across the district. You're getting it with readily available coaching resources and things like that. So, yeah, that's a different show. We actually ought to explore that and talk about. I know that I'm doing some work on collaborative PD, and that's a topic that's becoming more and more prominent that I'll be exploring lately in the coming weeks. I do want to mention that obviously this is a time for teachers to get your students set up in whatever systems you're using. I know I'm a Remind connected educator and do some work with them, and I've been seeing a lot of teachers that have been sharing that they've had a good amount of success with Remind. I think everybody's probably familiar with it, but this is basically a free service that allows your parents to, obviously the parents of your students, but your parents and guardians to subscribe to a group messaging system without ever providing the teacher with their direct contact information, so that the teacher can send out messages and announcements that go out to everyone who is subscribed to the class or to that group. I know that we've used that even for Ed Camp announcements. We're setting one of those up for our professional development opportunities that we're doing through our state program. I've seen school counselors that are doing that to, for instance, send out reminders to seniors for, cap and gown deadlines, senior portrait deadlines, scholarship opportunities and deadlines, things like that. So that's a great service. And
I have a question about Remind for you.
Go ahead.
With the app or without the app? Because I never used it with the app on my phone. I would use it with the web app and just strictly as a text. But looking at it, I was doing a training on Remind the other day, so of course I checked it all out again. And the app seems like there's lots of bells and whistles added, but I don't know if it feels sort of like a distraction from the simplicity I liked of just, let me go put in a message and schedule it to go out Wednesday afternoon and be done with it.
Well, and I was getting ready to ask until you added that clarification. Are you thinking of it from the recipient or the sender point of view?
I'm thinking of it from the sender point of view, but it seems like they're putting in some feedback sorts of loops, things with if your recipients also have the app.
Right, and I think the recipients, especially if you are in more than one Remind group, i.e. you have students at different grade levels, you happen to be a teacher who is getting Remind announcements related to professional development, and also your child's teacher is using Remind. If you're in more than one Remind group, I would strongly suggest the app, even if it's just that you see the text message go across, and instead of necessarily opening the text message, you open the app, just because it seems to be a little bit cleaner. I think from the sender point of view, the teacher point of view, I think the app is a response to, I'm standing in the grocery line and I forgot to share something, so I can do it quickly and easily. It has all of the functionality, and that may be what makes it look maybe a little busy. I think because the functionality for both sender and receiver are there in one place on a much smaller screen, it appears that way. But either way, it's a nice little service. There
I
are
like it a lot,
Right.
and it seems like everybody is using it.
Yeah, and there are some. I did mention it's free, and it is. But there are some additional features if you go as a school and things like that. But very handy, very helpful. Simply because an incredible majority of our parents would probably prefer to receive a text message or a message of some sort rather than a phone call for something that doesn't require more in-depth conversation. Not a total replacement, but let's face it, if nothing else, if the students learn that homework and test reminders are going out to their parents, they're going to be a little bit more prepared. And nothing can replace, from the teacher point of view, nothing can replace that one more message sent out to the parents to keep them in the loop, and done so in a way that is a bit more private for the teacher.
And with our phones, we have already learned to live on the push notification. This is the push notification for your classroom.
Absolutely. And hopefully those remind notifications that go out will include the homework and the test announcements, as well as sharing some of the good things that are happening in the classroom from the whole class, not individual student necessarily, but the great progress the class is making and things like that. This is also the time to look at setting up Edmodo classes. If you use Edmodo, I think more and more, even K-12 schools are incorporating LMSs. I may be a minority in that. Well, I know that I'm probably not, because I've shared this idea with too many teachers who believe the same. I think a full-featured LMS and Edmodo can happily live side by side in the same classroom. I think there are enough distinctions between the goal that you're trying to accomplish with those two systems that they can certainly live carefully together. And there is certainly the options, and as well as the other options.
What's that feature in Edmodo that lets you do those little standard-based quizzes? They're almost auto-generated. I forgot what that's called. Snapshot. I mean, that's worth signing up for Edmodo right there if that's all you use it for.
Right, yeah, and that is a nice little feature. And then you also have Spotlight, where you can get some, if you're from the teacher standpoint, where you can get some lesson ideas and some activity ideas and things like that. But I think even the nature of having Edmodo as a way for you to have closed, moderated ability to even have students communicate to one another is something that is a benefit. Yeah, Edmodo is often kind of described as the Facebook for education, and it has some of those functionalities and has a bit of that look and feel, especially maybe from the student view. But let's face it, I mean, how many billion users does Facebook have, because it works for that purpose? So
1.8.
Yeah, so the same thing for Edmodo, in that it can certainly increase communication inside the classroom and gives you a quick and easy way to do some polls and some other things when you just want quick results that can be done instantaneously, that shows you some decent looking results of polls and questions and things like that. And just overall is a nice little added tool for the classroom. So this is certainly the time to set up your Edmodo groups for your classes and get all of that set up as well. What other apps and services are you seeing teachers use in the classroom?
Well, I've got one I'm going to talk about for my Ed Tech Rec, so let me save that one. I have had a lot of teachers that have been wanting to know about Plickers and Cahoots for the Plickers and Kahoot, not Cahoots, for the past couple of weeks, wanting, and basically they get it pretty quick. They just want some basic PD on how to set this up. So I'm seeing a lot of them that want to hit the ground with these sorts of formative or assessment or like exit ticket sorts of apps like this. They want to be using those from the very beginning. So I've had lots of requests to talk to me a little bit about Kahoot, so I know how the bells and whistles of it. Because, once you log into it and get under the hood of any of these little apps, they're fine. And then Plickers, I've been seeing a lot of demand for, primarily because it means that my joke with the teachers I train is that when they pull out the phones, if you're not careful, all roads lead to Snapchat. So when they move it to Plickers, it means that you don't have to have 100% smartphone usage in your classroom. You're not having to worry about keeping them on task when they pull it out for Kahoot or something like that.
Correct.
So I've been seeing a lot of that.
So Plickers, just in case, I would be surprised if we have anybody that hasn't at least heard of it, but Plickers is basically a kind of a QR code sort of reading system where the teacher has the app and the students simply have a printed card or piece of paper that has a version of a QR code on it that, depending on how they hold it, corresponds to a particular response, and the teacher simply points their device camera at the entire class, and it fairly quickly and accurately reads all of the QR codes and tabulates the results and records the results, and each of the cards is tied to a number which can be assigned to a student, so you can actually track student responses and things like that.
And there's some nice new reporting features built into it now.
The reporting features on all of these apps are getting better and better because we are data driven, and that's helpful. I think the biggest push for Plickers is the classroom that has a limited number of devices or no student devices, or even if it's if you have a classroom full of Chromebooks, the Plickers is still a nice, quick and easy way to get whole class results without necessarily the kids having to be staring at their screens at that time. I think you're right in that there are times where I don't think any of us are all device all the time. So yeah, have the kids put the devices down and use the clicker or use the Plickers, and use that. I think Kahoot is great for whole group assessment and a wonderful engagement activity for students to really get them involved and paying attention to what you're doing and keeping them in the loop.
Have you seen the new? I think it's I saw it advertised when I was doing a bit on it. The Blind Kahoot. It's a feature they were advertising on it, and I looked at it, and just from my cursory glance, and this is from a strictly cursory glance while prepping for a session about 10 minutes before a session, it looks like a way that you can set up slides of instruction with Kahoot questions in between them. So it's sort of like a Kahoot-based presentation with the Kahoot question format every couple of slides.
So it doesn't have to be presented live. It can be answered at different times?
Well, no, it's more like I'm presenting this presentation to you. The next slide is going to be a review question on what we just did, or the next slide is going to be sort of a formative assessment question on the stuff that we have coming up.
Like an
on the next slide.
Like an embedded Kahoot.
Right, exactly. Only it's within the Kahoot app. That's what it seemed to be. That's what it seemed to be. If it's not there yet, it seemed to be what it's leaning to. So I'm interested in that. That's a nice feature if they can build that right in.
So we'll assign that to you as your next EdTech Rec. Not today, but we'll give you a little homework.
Well, I'll at least report back on it when I take a look at it.
And so, I mean, again, Kahoot is fairly popular and
remember about 2 years ago when no one had heard of Kahoot, and now it's just, I see it everywhere.
Right. So those are some things that at least we're seeing. And as far as the back to school theme, this is the time to get everything set up. This is the time to introduce those. This is the time to let your students realize or help them realize that your class is going to be different. You're going to be incorporating some of these tools as far as for the teachers and for the coaches. This is certainly the time to introduce these tools to your faculty if you haven't already, but also be ready for to support them as they try to implement these, and to, on top of everything else, make sure that they are really truly being incorporated and not just used. It's great to have kids doing Kahoot, but when kids are doing Kahoot every Friday afternoon, just as an end of course or end of unit review, I've actually seen this happen where it was after the test and they were doing Kahoots on. Yeah, Marcus
I forget. No one can see, and on the internet, no one can see you shrug.
Right. So you have to make sure that they are realizing the benefits of it, and that it is Kahoot is a formative assessment tool. Right now, that's its value. It's formative, and I do encourage teachers to make sure that many of their Kahoot questions are some of those should be at the low level of Bloom's and the low level of the critical thinking, so that you have some success for all students. I think.
Well, it's a time multiple choice. There's not. I mean, that's what it's got to be what it's designed for.
Right. Yeah. So, I guess I was trying to think of a better way to say some easy questions, so that everybody is having some success. One of the things that I wish, and maybe I should dive in. I would like to see an untimed Kahoot. Where you can have it where it's more on the accuracy necessarily than on the speed of response. Because you'll have some kids that simply will excel at that speed of response every time. All right, Mark, looks like we've kind of talked about a lot of back-to-school things. How about we do some EdTech Recs? I actually remembered this time. And
Woohoo! So I don't have to do my little short-armed pantomime up to you over the video.
I noticed that you posted a picture of our recording session. I do think that picture needs to go out at some point. You doing our little EdTech Recs response.
Well, mine is not really an instructional technology. It's more of an organizational thing, and it's not even really made for teachers. But I'll just cut to the chase. It's Google Voice. And some of you just went, oh, yes, Google Voice. That's awesome. And some of you went, huh? I've been using Google Voice since about 2009, 2010. It has not changed one lick at that time. It is the redheaded stepchild, no offense to redheads like my wife, of Google that never gets a full update. However, it's been just incredibly useful for me in the classroom. So first, you cannot use it with a Google Apps for Education login. You need a straight up Google login, Google, Android, Gmail, any of it, that works. Do a search for Google Voice. I think it's google.com/voice is what you're going to end up at. And if it's your first time there, it's going to go, hey, do you want a new phone number? Your answer to this is going to be yes. You will walk through, it will verify that you own your mobile phone because it's going to be attached to your mobile phone a little bit, very tenuously attached to your mobile phone. So it'll walk you through verifying. It'll call your phone number, call your phone number. You'll enter a code, that sort of thing. And then you'll select your phone number. You can put in a zip code so it's local. You can also put in things like if you've got a 3-letter combination or something like that you want to use, it'll try and match that. I haven't had much success with that part, but it theoretically will work with that. So you have a phone number now. Now, here's the way I set it up. I would set it up that if a parent called it, because parents called it, students never called it. When a parent called that fake phone number, that phone number that is not mine, they would get, you reached Mr. Coleman, please leave a message. The parent would leave a message, and I've installed the Google Voice app on my phone, iPhone and Android. So the parent leaves a message, I get a notification on the phone. By the time usually I walked over to check it, it would have a transcription of that parent message. Now, granted, parent enunciation may make your mileage vary on how well the transcription is, but generally it was pretty good. And so you've got that transcription of the message if you need to print it out for a documentation folder, and you can go to the Google Voice website and just print it out. Or you can listen to the message right there from the app on your phone. If you decided to call the parent back, you dial the number and your phone would ring, and then you would hear it calling the parent. The reason it did that is the parent would get the caller ID of your fake number. The parent would not have your real phone number. Students can text it, parents can text it, but students text more than the parents with this. You are limited to 100 outgoing texts a day, but that means your students could text you a question, you text them back instead of you waiting for a student to check their email. And because of this, you can answer that quick question for them real easily. They'll respond to it. If there's ever a question about what's been said, you can go to the Google Voice website, print out the entire text conversation in case they said something inappropriate to you, accuse you of saying something inappropriate, all those sorts of situations. Also, there are ways to record the call with it and get the transcription of the recorded call. So it's a real handy tool to provide everybody a phone number that they can use, they can text, they can call, but they don't have your real phone number. Now, if you change that phone number, it does cost $10. That's fairly new to charge that $10 to change your phone number. That's a fairly new thing. But you can block numbers on it. You can set it on do not disturb me for the entire week of Thanksgiving. All those sorts of nice, handy features that allow you to communicate with parents without them having your real phone number. And it's a lot easier to pay $10 for a new phone number than actually change your cell phone number and then let all your friends and family know you got new digits.
Absolutely.
So Google Voice is my recommendation for this time of year.
Okay. I'm going to go with, I drew a complete blank, ClassFlow. ClassFlow is a great lesson presentation app it's actually owned by the folks at Promethean that do the interactive boards. However, it is not limited to Promethean, and you don't have to have a Promethean board to use it. But it allows you to create very in-depth lessons that include a variety of interactive activities, quizzes in multiple formats, present videos, things like that. And all of that is embedded in the lesson. And those lessons can be presented by you, shared out in a number of ways. And this is actually something that I've been aware of for a while and have just begun working with extensively and really digging down into all of the features. And I'll tell you what, I am really enjoying the feature set that into ClassFlow. So I actually am going to be doing a blog post on it sometime over the next couple of weeks when I get one lesson kind of really fleshed out, just to see all the different features and things like that. But check it out at ClassFlow. I'll have a link for you in the show notes, and it is a free service. So to me, it's just one additional way to send you the material, so that it's not the same presentation model over and over. So even if you're already using one of the other many great presentation formats, you mentioned Prezi earlier, I'm an advocate of mixing things up and trying to find the tool that fits you best as a teacher. And as a coach, we need to think about the tool that best suits our individual teachers, and that may not always be the same tool for everyone. So we try to be to be familiar with a variety of tools. What do we talk about? The instructional coaches, even though we sometimes use the word specialist in that title, the old joke in the medical profession, what's the difference between a specialist and a general practitioner?
I don't know.
Thank you. You're a little bit delayed there, but a specialist knows everything about nothing, and a general practitioner knows nothing about everything. So sometimes as a coach, we have to be that general practitioner where we have a working knowledge of a wide variety of tools and strategies so that we can share those and dig down into individual things when we need to. But we need to serve the needs of our teachers, and that may vary from product to product. So
I've noticed ClassFlow is getting some traction, and the reason I'm thinking about this is we looked at it around our system in fall when we were doing some purchasing and trying to think what lesson display packages we were going to use with some new flat panel TVs we were getting. But as I was evaluating 1,500 tweets for a dissertation still in progress, I noticed a bunch, I can't quantify it now, but at least a couple of dozen links to ClassFlow content that had been generated. And since I was familiar with ClassFlow from investigating it just a couple of months beforehand, I found it interesting that I kept seeing ClassFlow content being linked. So apparently it's getting a little traction, at least right now.
Right. It is getting some more traction. I think, again, the feature set is very deep. So I will admit that the feature, it's one of those products that the feature set is so deep that you need to spend some time digging into it before you decide that it's not for you. I think the quality of the interactive lessons can be such that extra time is well worth it if you'll spend that extra time. So that also may be why I think that it may not be the best choice for every lesson. You can basically send it out to devices, as in, the students go to a website, just like everybody else. You type in a code, and it connects their devices to yours. And one of the best features, in my mind, that is quick and easy to use, is as soon as they connect with that, with one tap, you instantly have a whiteboard that you can work on that every device connected sees. So even just for the connected whiteboard, real-time connected whiteboard functionality, ClassFlow is a nice little tool to play with. So we will put links to those and the other things we've talked about in the show notes, and we'll have that for you shortly. We'll get the episode posted. Again, we are as we have mentioned several times, we're trying to stick to basically a 2-week schedule. It's not always the same day, and that's just the nature of our jobs as far as finding the time to work around conferences and appointments and things like that. Mark and I were actually discussing pre-show all the different conferences that we've got coming up and are working towards right now. So we will try to report back on those. I am Keith George, the Big Tech Coach. I am on Twitter at Big Tech Coach, and you can also find my blog and the show notes and everything like that at www.bigtechcoach.com. Mark is on Twitter at
J. Mark Coleman, JMarkStoleman, and I'm on pretty much any platform you find J. Mark Coleman. That's me. So,
all right, folks, we thank you again for listening in. We hope that we have provided you with a tip or two, along with some thought-provoking conversation, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Again, thanks for joining us at today's Tech Coach, and we'll see you next time.